you recording for?
This is Kevin Dixon asking his girlfriend India Mackey why she's recording him. The two had been fighting. Pay attention to Dixon's hands. He's wiping his fingerprints off of bullets.
Think I'm playing, huh? Hit you with this big 4-5 hollow tips, gonna eat your ass up.
Moments later, police say an angry Dixon fired at India, killing her while sitting in a van in his Warren driveway. Police would pull him over in East Point Tuesday night for driving erratically. Her dead body next to him.
Imagine holding your phone, watching a video that captures the last moments of someone's life. It's a chilling thought, but for 20-year-old India Mackey, it was a grim reality. She sat in a van with her boyfriend, Kevin Dixon, her camera rolling, knowing something wasn't right. The tension was building. Words were exchanged, and in those moments, she was recording him loading a gun, pointing it at her, and threatening her with violence. But what she didn't know was that, just moments after that video ended, her life would be stolen in cold blood. This wasn't a random act. This wasn't a mistake. Kevin Dixon, just 18 years old, had a temper that was out of control, and India had witnessed it too many times before. Yet, as the argument escalated, she chose to record it. Perhaps she thought it was the only way to protect herself. Perhaps she hoped it would be proof that would never have to be used. But what followed next is nothing short of horrifying. Kevin Dixon, with a loaded weapon, pulled the trigger. India Mackey was shot, and that was the last time her family would ever hear her voice. This is the tragic story of India Mackey, a woman whose life was taken in a horrifying moment of violence, captured forever in the last video she ever made. Stay with me as we break down the shocking details of this case that still haunts her family today. But before we move forward, don't forget to subscribe to Silent Crimes HQ, because stories like these demand to be heard and justice demands to be served. India Mackey was more than just a name. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, someone who brought light to the lives of those around her. Born in Michigan, India had always been the kind of person who wore her heart on her sleeve. Whether it was helping a friend through a tough time or brightening up the room with her smile, she was the person you turned to when you needed support. But beneath her warm exterior, India was about to face something no one, not even she, could predict. She was 20 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. Yet in the blink of an eye, everything would change. India had dreams. She wanted to make a future for herself. Like many young women her age, she was still figuring out who she was. But one thing was clear. She never deserved the fate that awaited her. India wasn't perfect, but who is? Like many young people, she found herself in relationships that tested her patience and her boundaries. At the time, India had been in a relationship with Kevin Dixon, a man who, on the surface, seemed charming and caring. But behind closed doors, things were different. Those who knew her said she was a woman full of life. Yet in the moments leading up to her death, something had begun to unravel, something darker that she had no way of escaping. India's family described her as someone who wanted nothing more than peace and happiness. They knew her as someone who valued love and loyalty. But they also knew that in this world, those things are sometimes the hardest to come by. No one could have foreseen the betrayal that would cut her life short. When India Mackey met Kevin Dixon, it seemed like a match made in the early days of youth, full of promise, laughter, and the hope that love could overcome any obstacle. At first, their relationship appeared innocent enough, a young couple figuring out what it meant to be together. But as time went on, cracks began to form, hidden beneath the surface. For India, those cracks were something she couldn't ignore. Yet she found herself unable to break free. Kevin was just 18 when they started dating, a few years younger than India, but already carrying a weight of aggression and volatility that seemed to show up more often as their relationship went on. What began as a passionate connection quickly shifted into something darker, something that no one, especially India, could have ever anticipated. Friends and family began to notice the subtle changes in India. She started pulling away, becoming quieter, more reserved. The once carefree young woman who had so much hope for the future began to show signs of distress, her eyes heavy with worry. The man she had trusted with her heart seemed to grow more controlling, his temper more unpredictable. The arguments started to escalate, small disagreements that turned into heated, venomous exchanges. It wasn't the kind of relationship that anyone would wish for their loved one to endure. Yet, in the middle of it all, India continued to hold on, perhaps believing that love could fix what was broken. But the truth was, love was never going to save her from what Kevin had become. And then came the video, a chilling, fateful decision that India would make, without knowing how significant it would be. She began recording Kevin's behavior, capturing moments when his anger was on full display, trying to hold on to any semblance of control over a situation that was spiraling out of her hands. What was once a gesture of protection, an attempt to safeguard herself, became the tragic evidence of her last moments. The evening of November 19th, 2019, should have been like any other. A time for India to make it through another day in a difficult relationship, perhaps hopeful that tomorrow would be better. But what unfolded in the cramped space of a van parked in Kevin Dixon's driveway would become a tragic, defining moment in both their lives. One that would be replayed and scrutinized for months to come. In the cold of that Michigan night, India found herself sitting beside the very person who, only moments earlier, had seemed like the one she could confide in, the one who would protect her. But now, Kevin was no longer that person. As their argument grew more heated, India's instincts kicked in. She pulled out her phone. In a desperate attempt to capture the truth, she began recording Kevin, who was loading bullets into a handgun. It's chilling to think that, in those seconds, India must have known, deep down, that this wasn't just another argument. This wasn't just another quarrel that would end with apologies. No, this was something far more dangerous, and she instinctively began to record it. Kevin Dixon's voice crackled through the phone as he threatened her, taunting her as he loaded the gun. The video captured his anger, his recklessness, his disregard for the woman sitting next to him, and his eerie calm as he continued to prepare the weapon he would later use to end her life. In the video, you hear the clicks of the bullets as they slide into place, and India's voice, almost drowned by Kevin's threats. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how wrong it was going to get. This was the moment that would become her final stand. A desperate attempt to have proof, to make sure that her last words and the truth of what happened would not vanish into silence. And then, as the video ended, Kevin Dixon did what India had been recording him do. He pulled the trigger. India Mackey's life ended, but the video she had recorded would live on. It was the last evidence she had of what she was enduring, and it became the only thing left for her family to cling to. The sound of the gunshot echoed in the cold night air. In those fleeting moments after India Mackey hit stop on her phone, a life was extinguished, and the nightmare became all too real. Kevin Dixon, with a chilling calmness, pulled the trigger. India, who had hoped the recording would be enough to hold him accountable, was now a victim, her body slumped lifeless in the passenger seat of the van. But the horror didn't end there. Kevin Dixon, with his girlfriend's body still beside him, showed no sign of remorse. In a detached state, he drove the van through the streets of East Point, Michigan, with India's lifeless form still next to him. The streets blurred as he sped through them, his mind consumed with whatever twisted thoughts propelled him forward. It wasn't until Dixon's erratic driving caught the attention of a police officer that things took a dark turn. As the officer pulled him over for suspicion of reckless driving, the gravity of the situation became clear. Inside that van, a young woman, India Mackey, was dead, and Dixon had been the one to pull the trigger. When the police approached the van, what they found was beyond comprehension. India's body, cold and still, was a stark contrast to the disturbing scene that unfolded moments earlier. Dixon, now caught in the web of his own actions, couldn't escape the reality of the situation. The blood on his hands was undeniable. Kevin Dixon was arrested that night, his world collapsing under the weight of what he had just done. He was charged with first-degree murder, carrying a concealed weapon and felony firearm. As the authorities processed the scene, the chilling reality of India's final moments began to sink in. Moments that would forever change her family and those who knew her. For India's loved ones, the shock of losing her so violently was beyond belief. They would later discover the video, her last effort to protect herself, her last attempt to make sure someone would know the truth. But no one could have prepared them for the pain of watching it, knowing that those final seconds were all they had left of her. But before we move forward, don't forget to subscribe to Silent Crimes HQ, so we can bring you more stories like this. The days following India Mackey's death were filled with disbelief and anguish. For her family, the loss was unbearable. India wasn't just a daughter or a sister. She was the heart of their lives, someone they loved deeply and never expected to be taken away so violently. The reality of her death, still fresh in their minds, was compounded by the brutal way in which it unfolded. The news spread quickly, shaking the community to its core. How could a young woman, full of life and promise, end up with a man who would take it all away? How could anyone, especially someone she trusted, be capable of such cold, calculated violence? Those who knew India were left searching for answers, struggling to reconcile the warm memory of the girl they loved with the horrific crime that had stolen her from them. But the answers weren't easy to find. The video India had recorded, capturing Kevin Dixon's threats, was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it was undeniable proof of what had happened. The terrifying moment that made it clear India had known the danger she was in. But on the other hand, it was a constant reminder of the horror she experienced in her final moments. For her family, watching that video was an unimaginable pain. It showed India's final, desperate attempt to survive, to protect herself, and to leave behind a trace of the truth. It was all they had left, but it came with a brutal reminder that the person she had trusted most had taken her life. As Kevin Dixon's trial loomed, the case became a symbol of domestic violence, the kind of tragedy that strikes without warning, often leaving victims voiceless until it's too late. India Mackey was now a name in the headlines, but to her family, she was a daughter, a sister, a friend, someone who should never have been taken in this way. Dixon was charged with first-degree murder, and the court would soon decide whether he would pay for the horrific crime he'd committed. But no amount of punishment could bring India back. No verdict could undo the devastation her family had suffered. And so, the question remained. Would justice be served, or would Kevin Dixon slip through the cracks, another abuser whose actions went unchecked until it was too late? Only time would tell. What drove Kevin Dixon to kill? Was it a moment of madness, or was it something deeper? A pattern of violence that had been festering for months? Could this tragic event have been prevented if someone had noticed the signs earlier? These questions would linger long after Dixon's trial, as people tried to understand how someone so young could commit such a brutal act. As the wheels of justice began to turn, the case of India Mackey's tragic death moved into the courtroom. Kevin Dixon, once a boy who seemed incapable of true violence, now stood charged with first-degree murder, his future hanging in the balance. The evidence against him was undeniable. The video that India had recorded before her death spoke volumes. It was a chilling testament to his calculated actions, an irrefutable record of the moments leading up to her murder. But even with the footage, the case was far from straightforward. Prosecutors had the difficult task of proving that Dixon's actions were premeditated, that this wasn't just a momentary loss of control, but the result of a history of anger and aggression. They would have to show the jury that this was no accident, no impulsive outburst. It was murder, plain and simple. Dixon's defense, on the other hand, worked tirelessly to present a different narrative. They claimed that the shooting was the result of a momentary lapse in judgment, that the gun had gone off during the argument in a fit of rage, and that Dixon had never intended to kill India. It was a defense aimed at reducing the charge, to turn a cold-blooded murder into something more manageable. But as the trial unfolded, the truth became harder to deny. The video captured Dixon's threats, his actions as he loaded the gun, his words as he taunted India, and ultimately, the silence that followed when her life was snuffed out. There was no ambiguity in what had happened. Dixon didn't just snap. He methodically loaded the weapon, threatening her life, and pulled the trigger with purpose. For India's family, the trial was a painful journey. Watching the man who had taken their daughter's life defend himself, trying to justify the unjustifiable. But they remained hopeful. They had to. For India, for the girl they had lost far too soon. They wanted justice to be served. Would Kevin Dixon be held accountable for his actions? Would the legal system ensure that he would never harm anyone else again? Or would he, as many abusers do, find a way to escape the full weight of his crimes? The next steps in the trial would determine not only Dixon's fate, but also how much the justice system truly valued the life of a woman who had been so tragically taken. And as the court session drew to a close, the only certainty was this. No matter the verdict, India Mackey's story would be remembered, her life would not be forgotten, and her family's pursuit of justice would never end. The trial of Kevin Dixon eventually came to an end, but no verdict, no sentence, could ever undo the devastation caused by his actions. The courtroom drama may have reached its conclusion, but for India Mackey's family, the pain of their loss would never cease. India's voice, silenced too soon, continued to echo through every courtroom, through every piece of evidence, and through every tear that fell from the eyes of those who loved her. While Dixon was held accountable for his crime, the question that lingered long after the gavel fell was simple. Could this have been prevented? How many other young women find themselves trapped in relationships with toxic, abusive partners, never realizing that the danger is not just emotional, but deadly? India's story became a painful reminder of the all-too-common truth, that domestic violence often remains hidden until it's too late. India Mackey may have been taken from this world too soon, but her story will live on as a powerful reminder that we must never turn a blind eye to the warning signs of abuse. And in the silence of that van, in the recording she left behind, India's voice will never be silenced again.